Good morning and welcome to another Committee of the Whole for Thursday, February 22nd, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 9:30 and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territories of the Sechelle Nation and the Squamish Nation. Before we adopt the agenda, I'd like to make a motion to accept Alton Toth as the vice chair for this meeting. Seconded. All in favor? Very good. All right. Now we have an agenda in front of us. I'm looking for a seconder for adoption. All in favor? Very good. Okay, so we're going to move on. Presentations and delegations. We have Ben Lowen, engineer from Geo Advanced Engineering. GeoAdvice Engineering. If Ben could come to the table and give his his presentation, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All right, I'm just going to share my screen here, and then we can begin. All right, so once again, thank you, Chair, for having us here to present. I'd like to start off by thanking the district staff, GM Rosenboom, Manager Walkie, and Assistant Manager O'Rourke for their support on this project and getting us to a spot where we're here presenting to you today. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you a summary of the work that's been done on this hydraulic capacity analysis for the SCRD. So here's a brief agenda of what we'll cover today: an introduction, an overview of the project as a whole. We'll talk through the model development, the existing water demand as we see it today, the fire flow demands, which I know you have talked about in recent meetings here, how the model was calibrated to ensure that you have the most up-to-date data and you're getting the best results out of your model. Then we'll talk through the future growth assumptions and the calculations and how that was completed and how that's used to kind of forecast some of these maps that you see on the side and some of the results that you'll see in this report. We'll talk through that capacity analysis, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. So yeah, we will hop right in here. Okay, so an introduction of the purpose of this model. This was GeoAdvice was retained by the SCRD to amalgamate, join, and all the different data that the SCRD has, and to develop a single hydraulic model to analyze your systems for pressures and flows, and just to see where the available flow, what kind of pressures you guys have in your system. So the hydraulic model was developed. It was calibrated. So this involves doing field testing where we go and take real-time data in the field and match it with the model to make sure that the model can give as accurate data as in the field. At that point, once the model is calibrated to real data from the field, then we analyze your system and then recommend upgrades, improvements as needed. These are the 7 systems that were analyzed as part of this project: Chapman, Langdale, Egmont, Cove Cay, East Bourne, and then North and South Pender. These are systems that were analyzed as part of this project. All right, model development. So how this model was developed, we'll talk about the 6 main key areas of how this was done. We'll keep this high level and be able to kind of answer or address any questions you have at the end. So task 1, data collection and review. This was where we worked with district staff, as I mentioned, to review the existing data that you had available at the time that we started back in 2022. What data was available for your infrastructure, for your settings, just to get a sense of what you had available to you. Then we went and, so task number 2, model development. So we took your GIS, which is your asset management side of things with the district, to basically model or update the models that were provided to us that were existing. Task 3 was looking at the primary system components. So this is things like your storage, your pumping, your valves, so PRVs, pressure regulating valves. These are often found in between the boundaries between some of your pressure zones, which we'll get to in a second. So just reviewing all of the data to making sure that we're starting off with the correct data, so all the assumptions are valid. Then task 4, as I mentioned, the pressure zones, making sure that we have all the right boundary assumptions for you and your system, making sure that we have all the right assumptions and that match the calibration, which again we'll get to in a moment. Task 5 was looking at what your existing demands are in your system as we see it today. This was based on 2021 data, meter data, bulk meter data provided by the district. Task 6, fire flow demands. So this was taken based on your land use, again, data provided by the district. This is used for a fire flow analysis, and there'll be a further section on this where we kind of talk about this in depth, but basically making sure the correct fire flows were allocated based on land use for MMCD requirements. Again, we'll get into that in a second, to making sure all the data was correctly allocated in the model. Oh, my apologies. Step 3, existing water demand. So this, again, was based on the 2021 water meter and bulk meter consumption data. This was provided by the district and used as the best case, or used with the best information available for our existing demand. This, again, accommodates for residential, commercial, institutional, all kinds of demands in your system. And a brief summary is shown here for so the average day demands. This is what's a typical day in the SCRD. Maximum day demand represents kind of the hottest day in the summer. You think back to the heat dome, kind of days like that as a day. And then the peak hour demand is that worst case scenario hour under that MDD demand day. So that most water usage, that highest hour demand draw on the system on that worst case day. So that's what your peak hour demand is. Fire flows. So what is a fire flow demand? It's the amount of water needed to combat a fire. This is dependent on land use under MMC conditions, and then we'll talk about FUS in a second here. So it's based on some specifics, land use and also building types. Fire flow is critical when designing water systems to make sure that sufficient water can be conveyed to fight a fire as needed. These are typically expressed in liters per second. That's the unit that is used. And the goal or the design factor is to make sure you maintain adequate pressure at the hydrants while fighting this fire. So that's 22 PSI under the MMCD guidelines, and that's the Master Municipal Construction Documents. So for this project, as it was a holistic approach to looking at your whole system, the MMCD guidelines were used, and the next page will show us what those requirements were specifically. For more detailed and development reviews or specific properties, that's where an FUS, a fire underwriter survey, fire flow demand calculation is completed. It takes into effect a number of variables that are unique to each site specifically, the dimensions of a building, the areas, the proximity to other buildings. So for this assessment, this capacity analysis, MMCD design guidelines were used, and here are those required fire flows. So these will match. We will be going through a couple figures later on that have color-coded dots, as they were, on these figures coming up, which I believe you've seen a few weeks ago. And those correlate to these required fire flow thresholds, or these land use types. Model calibration. So this model was calibrated to a number of field tests that were completed across the SCRD. This is done to ensure that there's high confidence in the model. So what was done is it was done in the field, and we're measuring pressures and flows when actuating or opening a hydrant. And then what was done was these were then inputted into this model to make sure that the model was replicating what the field results were showing. So this was done under 40 hydrant tests, 40 SCADA sites. So this is real-time data from your infrastructure and facilities, measuring reservoir levels, flows, and pressures. This is all taken into account to making sure that your system was as accurately represented as what the field results are showing. Just to give you confidence that what these results that we'll talk about in a moment, that they're accurate from what is shown in the field. The future growth demand calculations and allocations. So this was taken at a 25-year planning horizon. So we were using 2021 meter and bulk meter data for the existing scenario. And for a 25-year, we used a growth rate of 2% per year based on discussions with the district and district staff. And here are the MMCD design rates for the metered system that you guys have. These are just used these are used as projections to make sure that all the correct assumptions are accounted for when designing for a future scenario. Here is a look at the future populations as it broken down per region and water service area based on that 25-year projection. I'll give you a moment to take a look, just to look through that. You'll see that there are, in some water services areas, you'll see larger growth. So that residential plus equivalent, the equivalent is the commercial, so that institutional, commercial, or industrial portion as well is all accommodated in this population growth table. If you have questions of this, we can touch base at the end as well. These, again, are based on the latest SCRD population data at the time, OCP data at the time, census data, growth research. I understand that you're working through an OCP update that will be coming online in a few years. So these will be updated based on that, and as more data becomes available, these results could be updated as well. Okay, the next part was the capacity analysis. So once a model has been updated or inputted with the data, has been calibrated to show that the model results are aligned with the field tested results, the next step is to analyze your system. And so we were analyzing both the existing and future scenarios in your model to determine the capacities in a number of your facilities and infrastructures, pumping capacities, valve capacities, storage capacities, and the overall system hydraulics. So how flow is conveyed, what the pressures are in your system. And we'll look at a couple figures coming up that will have some color-coded results of this capacity analysis being shown. For the fire flow analysis, is also run once the model is completely calibrated. And so here's some results that just show without upgrades, so no system improvements are accounted for in this figure. So under the future scenario, the fire flow deficiencies you'll see highlighted in red. These are where the available flow that's able to be produced out of a hydrant at this location is less than the required fire flow, which is based on land use that's tied with the MMCD. So single family, multifamily, commercial, those kinds of land uses. So the red dots again are where the available flow predicted by the model is less than the required fire flow set out by the land use and the MMCD requirements. We're going to talk through, again, so the available fire flow for each, we're going to look through 3 separate areas here. So the available fire flow in 3 separate areas, there is a legend on the bottom left of these screens. Again, red is less than 60, which is the minimum required fire flow under the MMCD for single-family land use lots, all the way up to purple, which is more than 225, which is the industrial required fire flow. So as you'll see in Seashelt, the comparison specifically from existing to future, you'll see some color changes where available drops down a threshold. This is in part due to the change in land use from the existing land use to the OCP land use. So that's just a change in some of those requirements, as well as the additional demands from the bill or the growth projections for those 25 years at 2%. So there's a combination of those. Again, the next area here is you'll see some consistencies between the 2 systems. Again, some systems are more susceptible to the growth. Some areas have more growth than the others, and this just shows a little bit of the impact from existing to future for the available fire flow. Again, our third area here showing the Garden Bay South Pender area. There is basically what this is showing, again, a significant portion of red, which means there is less than 60 liters per second of available flow. 60 liters is the minimum required fire flow based on MMCD guidelines. So conclusions, before we open to questions here, just a quick overview summary of where your system is at for deficiencies related to reservoirs, pumps, valves. Again, those are those PRVs, pressure regulating valves, that reduce flow from a higher pressure zone to a lower pressure zone, your low pressure locations, and fire flow deficient locations. These values are subject to change based on future projects, land use changes, lot sizing, provincial mandates. These values are based on the data that we have available at this time. And now I'd like to open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Loudon. I ask that you stop sharing your screen, and we open the floor to questions from the directors. We have a question from Director Inkster.
Thank you. So, in your presentation, you've obviously presented future, and thanks for that. And I think that is obviously was to come, and thanks for making that happen quickly to let us know what the future may look like and the preparations we may need to do. I would ask through the chair to the individual presenting and Mr. Rosenblum is if we look at the parts of Seashelt that have or will have issues, challenging issues with pressure, and it's based on what could be density changes and or development in those areas, will the upgrades be part of the subdivision and future developments in those areas? So will it says that the future looks more difficult in some of our areas, parts of Upper West Seashelt, West Porpoise Bay, and that's based on some changes and some decisions we will probably make at the district to allow development or more dense development in certain areas. So will the fix be part of the approval process? Thanks.
GM Rosenboom, you have an answer for that?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I have some problems with Zoom, so I might not be visible. Oh, I'm back again at the camera. Hold on. I think the next step for staff to do is to develop a fire flow action plan. The fire flow action plan, once developed, will ultimately outline what kind of improvements might be required or what kind of alternative approaches can be taken to address the issue. In some of these areas, including the West Seasheld area or the Seasheld area in general, because there are several areas within Seasheld. Which part is subsequently of those measures is currently proposed to be undertaken by the SRD, and which might be up for the developers to undertake, that's to be determined. First, we need to figure out what's the overall plan, and then we can decide, okay, how do we move forward with development in those areas? Maybe there are some upgrades that can support, that can be done to support an entire area. Maybe the SRD decides that's an upgrade that we want to take on, and there might be some hotspots left where we say, okay, those are for the developers to take on. But that's the analysis that we still have to complete, and that's the next step that we have to do based on this analysis. So the fire flow action plan, first we would like to get a better understanding of what are actually the drivers for each of these areas. Is it pumps? Is it mains? Is it valves? Is it and how much main and how much valve and how much storage capacity? And what are the priorities in terms of where can we get the most bang for our buck in terms of improvements? And how can we come up with a plan, a 5 to 10 year upgrade plan for all areas? And how do we prioritize all areas versus one versus each other? So there's a lot of steps for us to figure out in terms of SNRD, SNSCRD. How do we strategize this? Is West Seasheld the top priority, or is Half Moon Bay, which also has some challenging areas? How do we come in terms of effort? Where do we put the most priority? I think so. Those will be items that staff will continue to work on in upcoming months, and hope to present back with the draft fire flow action plan for board consideration later this year. And I can totally see that there might be another iteration there with board in terms of where do we set priorities, because that's ultimately also a political decision. How fast do we want to go? What's the timeline we want to have this all addressed or not, et cetera, et cetera. So there's still a lot of questions to be answered here.
Thank you for your, follow-up?
Okay. You've said that before. We have a plan coming, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for all the work up to this point, because it's really needed, because we've identified some issues. But when the municipality does a subdivision approval, we look at, in our example, we look at our sewage treatment system, and then we look to see whether our pumping systems within those approvals are large enough. And if they're not, then we look to and put a plan in place to make improvements and or enlarge. We're dealing with one at the bottom of Wakefield, which people probably have seen all the equipment there. So, I mean, of course, municipal planning 101, but would that be something the regional district will then do? Obviously, this is going to be happening here. Let's look at our nearby pumping systems to move the water and pressurize it more to move to the larger areas and or the densification. I'm assuming it's the same process.
Thank you very much. Assistant Manager O'Rourke can explain it in way more detail, but we follow currently exactly that same process.
This camera doesn't want to turn on. Thank you. Yeah, as Mr. Rosenboom was saying, yeah, we follow a similar process. So, for example, in areas of West Seashelt, what will be required is the current water source is Chapman Creek for that. And you're looking at Selma Reservoir as well. So we're going to look at potentially upsizing Selma Reservoir if required, if there's significant growth identified in West Seashelt, which in conversations with District of Seychelles staff, it looks like there might be more growth planned there than what is in the OCP. And consequently, we'll be working with them to kind of identify and just kind of get a number for what that growth might be. And following on, we'll look at major infrastructure upgrades, likely through Seashelt, like a transmission main upgrade, maybe pump upgrades, reservoir upgrade, which will have to be installed first, and then that'll make sure to be sufficient water that can actually get out to the area, and then from that point on, it's likely more of a developer will install the smaller infrastructures to service their specific developments. But yeah, there's a lot of work ahead, and with provincial mandates, things change, and hopefully we can identify what this work would be with the Fire Flow Action Plan. Thank you.
GM Rosenboom.
Maybe to add to what Manager or Assistant Manager O'Rourke was saying, you talked about Selma Reservoir. For me, that's a common term, but at the top of Reservoir Road, there's a reservoir which is called Selma Park. So that's a reservoir that's actually providing the pressure all the way to into Seashelt, as well as into parts of West Seashelt. So if that reservoir is undersized, it might impact the bigger area.
Thank you, GM Rosenboom. Great place to keep a reservoir at the end of Reservoir Road. Donna McMahon, Director from Area E, you are next.
Thank you very much. As accustomed as I am to our uniquely Canadian muddle of imperial and metric measurements, where I personally drive horizontally in kilometers and climb vertically in feet, when I get a report that's full of pounds per square inch and then liters per second, I struggle. So it would be helpful if there was a little, explanation for those of us who are trying to figure this out. I don't know if this is a collision of old standards and new standards or what the heck. My question is about the location of hydrants. There has been a lot of infill in my area, and there are some areas that you can see on the map where there is a very considerable distance between hydrants. Is this something that we are considering as part of this project?
Thank you for the question. As indicated, also 2 weeks ago at the board meeting, at the committee meeting, we are going to have discussions with the fire chiefs about these results, about the results we presented 2 weeks ago and we were presenting today. And as part of those discussions, of course, I expect that the spacing of fire hydrants will be part of this conversation as well. And it could, of course, very well be that I expect that there will be water main upgrades required as part of this work. So all those mains will, of course, have hydrants at the appropriate spacing, supporting the land use of the day. Because some of these spacings of hydrants were appropriate, but if zoning changes and development changes, of course, at some point they might not be appropriate anymore.
Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering how this kind of study impacts our ability or interest in taking on new water systems. I'm thinking of potential water systems we're looking at that are currently at a certain status. I'm assuming that these kind of studies will be done for those systems, and will that be part of the impacts and decisions that we have to make regarding those systems?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the board directed staff to work on 2 feasibility studies for taking on 2 new water systems, one in Hopkins and one in Dream Valley. And in both cases, we would assess any upgrades required to those systems based on the current MMCD standards. So yes.
Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking on 25 about existing and future scenarios. I was trying to figure out the size of the mains versus the size of the reservoir. I guess that's something that won't happen until we look at each individual area, right? Do I have that correct?
Thank you for the question. Could you clarify that, looking on the sizes of?
Well, it says that the conclusions or the approximate deficiencies are based like 27% on storage reservoirs, 2% on low pressure locations. My first conclusion is they're one and the same, but they obviously aren't. So I was wondering, how would you define the difference between the two?
Thank you for your question. Thanks for the clarification. Yes, some of the storage deficiencies may be tied to some of those low pressure and fire flow deficiencies. So there may be some connections there. Obviously, anytime you get to upgrade or add in additional storages, that's going to provide some additional flow and capacity into your system, and that will likely alleviate some of these deficiencies: fire flow, low pressure, the ones listed on this table. Correct.
A follow-up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was looking at all the red on South Pender, and my conclusion was I need a new storage tank, but I don't know if that's correct, and I guess we won't know until we get into detail. But is that?
Thank you for the question. I think in Pender, this is the first time any this type of analysis is completed for both Pender areas. It was never completed before because we never had a model for Pender. So I think the way the results for Pender are quite alarming, and there's quite a lot of red there, and there's a lot required. I think that's one of the areas where we really need to pay attention to in terms of where can we get bang for the buck? What are the upgrades that are most prominent? Is the reservoir, or what staff are considering is the size of the water main between the current treatment plant and the main reservoir down from the reservoir and the treatment plant into the system. Because as you can see on the maps, the first dot is still good, but after that it's red. So that means that there is a lot of pressure drop within that main, while there are not a lot of developments or branches coming off of it. So it means that maybe just upsizing that main could alleviate some of the area. So that's some of the analysis that we have to do. Let's say if you were to do an upgrade like that, what would the cost be, but what would be a timeline for that? But also, how much is then left of the other? So you have to build one measure on top of the other, and that's the work that we have to do for those areas.
Thank you for the answer. I'm going to go to alternate director Lumley.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I know that a lot of the flow in the future flow is based on future growth and development. Does that mean, is there an overlap? Can DCCs take care of a lot of this cost as far as like upgrading mains and so on and so forth?
Thank you for the question. I think DCCs are a way to fund some of the upgrades that might be required. I know that our CFO is listening in the background, but we are planning to update our DCC bylaw in the near future as well. And I think the Fire Flow Action Plan will provide a lot of information on the update process in terms of what would be the total cost to upgrade the system, where we want to upgrade them, and then you can actually set the DCC, upgrade the DCCs accordingly. So yes, DCCs are definitely part of the picture.
Thank you for the answer. I'm going to go to Director McMahon.
Thank you. I know I really shouldn't be asking about specific fire hydrants, but I can't resist. Along Reed Road, it's purple, 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 red, purple, 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 purple. Like, what's the matter with the fire hydrant at the corner of Reed and Payne?
Thank you for your question. I don't have the specific location open in front of me, but it's likely as a result of required fire flow. It's based on land use, so it may be a future. One of those parcels is designated for a higher density or a different zoning.
I'm going to go to the staff at the back of the room. If you'd come forward and identify yourself, please.
Thank you for the question. The hydrant at Payne and Reed is in Zone 2. The rest are in Zone 3.
Thank you for the answer. Does that answer your question, Director McMahon? Okay, good. I'm going to go to Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed in the introduction that you mentioned the 7 systems on the regional district water supply includes Eastbourne. I have to assume that you did not include Eastbourne in this study, and that the capacity of this ever-reaching fire flow standard is probably not realistic, if I'm interpreting correctly, and whether or not this is just another potential reason to look at moving that to its own standalone system rather than being within the regional or district water supply.
Staff, can you answer that?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. My answer is twofold. Yes, Eastbourne was included in this analysis. Besides fire flow, the water modeling study that was completed assessed a variety of indicators. Fire flow is one of them, low pressures, high pressures, others. So those other assessments were completed for Eastbourne, but given that Eastbourne is outside of any fire protection area, at least the one from the SRD, it was not assessed based on fire flows. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. I'm going to ask Director Inkster if you have a question.
You're asking me if I have a question? Oh, I do. So I asked about development and in the district of Sechelt and what that may mean in terms of working together with the district, the development industry, and the regional district to upgrade the equipment leading to those developments. My question now, though, is about those areas that are in the exterior of Sechelt that have, in future will have the red marks, obviously weak flow. And the reason I'm asking that is you won't necessarily at this point, because some of them are in agricultural areas and or up the mountainside, have that huge development that are in our more accessible pieces of our community and where we have the infrastructure. But what you do have the potential for is forest fires in those interface areas. And they're identified as red here in Sandy Hook, East Porpoise Bay, and West Sechelt once again. Especially up Mason, and I noticed along Gale there's some good infrastructure in there. It looks like it even goes into Sea-Watch, which we know isn't being used anymore, but there's good infrastructure there to deal with the forest fire issue if needed. But what would be the plan with those hydrants that are in those areas that won't see the growth but have people living there? And even though it may not be good policy to utilize municipal water on an interface issue because there may be a need for external water like water bombers in those unfortunate situations. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to pressurize those hydrants? Because there's a number of them in those really risky areas that we've talked about and that I think our emergency plan has talked about as risky interface areas. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I think those are the type of questions that we would like to answer in collaboration with our fire chiefs. All the fire chiefs on the coast, not only the SRD, but also the District Sechelt and Bender. Because that's where we need to look at what do they need, where's the interaction, what is their capacity, where does the wildfire service comes in these kind of situations. So I think those are good, great questions to answer in the fire flow action plan. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Director McMahon.
Yes, the last time we saw a fire flow report, we had a map, and the map started at 30 liters per second, and now we have new maps that all start at 60 liters per second. And I liked the old maps better because there were fewer red dots. So I was just going to ask staff why we have new maps.
It's ultimately 60 is the 30 was a leftover from. You might remember that in an earlier report we indicated that in 2013 the comprehensive water plan 30 was used for some areas as the threshold, and so in the old maps 30 was still included, and we found that it was actually not that relevant anymore because currently we're looking at 60 as a minimum. Thank you.
All right, follow up.
So if my residents should look at all the red dots in their neighborhood and be alarmed, what should I tell them?
I would tell them that nothing has changed compared to yesterday or the day before. So nothing has changed compared to a month ago or 2 months ago. The fire chiefs are doing what they're currently doing. They are aware that some areas have lower flows. We are aware that some areas have lower flows. This is now confirmed. We know the extent and the magnitude of that. Fire departments have abilities to fight fires in area with low flows. There are all kind of mechanisms in place, and they will continue to be in place. So doesn't mean that there's no work to be done on the infrastructure, but our message to residents is there's no need to panic at the moment because there's no change in situation. It's not that there is an emergency happening as we speak. This is something that has been developing over decades, and that may take a long time to address. And we're working on it.
Thank you for your answer. And I'm going to put in here that the.
Sorry,
Oh,
just wanna,
sorry. Go ahead, Mr.
sorry.
Rourke.
I just wanted to add one thing to that. It'd be worthwhile considering the red as like minimum standards we set for ourselves in designing infrastructure. So if you consider it that way, like fire chiefs are able to obviously combat fires that have been doing forever, but these are minimum standards we're setting for ourselves, and red, we don't want that.
Maybe one addition is, as indicated earlier by our consultant, the modeling was done under extreme scenarios, primarily the heat dome of 2021. Today there's not a heat dome. So we model and we plan for the worst case scenario. So in a lot of the time of the year, there's still completely no issue at all. And this is where but in the worst case scenario, when you have those really high temperature days, that's where those are also the scenarios where interface fires, as Director Inkster was just talking about, could create problems. So that's why we need to plan for that. We need to act, but in general, there's no alarm required at the moment.
And I was just going to put in that there was a mention in Mr. Loudon's report of a 22 PSI minimum, and that is, I believe, set by the fire trucks, and that is what a fire truck can pull out of a hydrant if it has 22 PSI. Then and so there's really been no change and no need to panic. I have Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Director McMahon stole my question about the 30 liter per second scale. However, I've spoken previously about MMCD and my concerns with applying the urban engineering standards to our remote and isolated sections of our community. So it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds in some of these areas where it's just not possibly going to be possible to upgrade to 60 liters per second or more. So I'll hold that for the time being. But when we look at these maps, as was mentioned just a moment ago, this is sort of worst case scenario, heat dome, fire, interface fire, all of that, like worst case scenario. Is there going to be an ability to integrate this with the GIS so that our public can see more of what the impacts are in their neighborhood on a daily basis, let's say, as well as the peak daily demand? Thanks.
Do you have an answer for that?
There is no real-time monitoring of pressures of our system. So the answer is no. This is all based on calibration of a water model, and that water model will take one water modeling run will take several days. So no, there's no live opportunity here.
Well, I seem to have exhausted my speakers list. Oh, no, there's Director Lee. Go ahead.
My curiosity got the better of me. Typically at a home, we get 40 PSI regulated down to 40 PSI, and yet we're talking 22 on a fire hydrant. Is that just simply the volume difference that's doing that, or how can that be?
Thank you for your question. So the design guidelines for your everyday domestic demands is 40 PSI, as you've mentioned. For fighting fires, there is a lower threshold requirement, a minimum requirement, in order to provide those large quantities of flows for a specific duration of time. So that's the 22 PSI minimum under a fire flow event or a circumstance. And then once that fire flow event is over, then the minimum pressure then goes back to 40.
Follow up?
So therefore, if someone was pumping water to fight a fire, my house would now have 22. Yes, thank you.
Well, I seem to have now exhausted my list, and I thank the delegation and the staff for this presentation. And at this point, I'd like to make a motion to receive all reports and delegations. Seconder, and all in favor? That passes. Thank you. We're going to go on to the next report, which is the Sangster Road Float Sublease Renewal. And we have, let me get to it. Manager Jackson, thank you for coming forward.
Sorry, the mic was not on. Apologies, I'll start over. I did hit the button. This report seeks to confirm board endorsement of the renewal of a water lot sublease with the Lagoon Waterfront Owner Society for Sangster Road Float in Electoral Area A. Although the main water lot lease was up for renewal in April 2019, SCRD has not yet been notified of an anticipated timeline for this process by the province. In order to bridge the gap until the main lease is renewed, staff recommend that the delegated authorities be authorized to execute the sublease agreement renewal with the addition of a month-to-month clause until the main lease is executed between the province and SCRD. Staff are here to answer questions. Thank you.
I'm going to look to the area director.
Yes, seeing no other questions from my fellow directors, I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 30, please.
We have a seconder, and all in favor? Very good. That passes. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. We're going to move on to request for proposal, planning enhancement project, Julie Clark, senior planner.
Good morning. Staff are pleased to bring forward this contract award report for OCP and zoning bylaw renewal, and are very much looking forward to launching this important work ahead. We wanted to note for your attention, the award is broken into phases as it is a large-scale project and funded over several budget years. You may also be aware that staff wish to request your additional recommendation today that this contract be awarded this afternoon at board in order to proceed with the work in the most timely way. Thank you.
Thank you, Planner Clark. I'm going to ask a question at this point. What is the level of engagement with the public on this review work? And is there a scope of work that the public can see so that they know what the scope of work is? Because I've got some community groups in my area that are very concerned about this. I try to tell them that this is something that the province has mandated for us to do, and so we're going to go ahead and do it. And I think, and personally, I think it can be a good thing if it's done properly. But I have to answer to my constituents.
Thank you very much for the question. We currently have a Let's Talk page up that you can direct your constituents to. That has sort of a broad scope right now for what the project will entail. And after the award of this contract, we will be able to update that Let's Talk page with a clearer timeline and the opportunities for participation. We're looking forward to getting there.
Thank you for the answer. I've got a speakers list. Director McMahon.
Yes, indeed. There is quite a bit of community interest out there. So if there are major updates to Let's Talk, perhaps you could flag the directors so that we can bring it to the attention of our communities. Well, KPMG is familiar with our situation, so it sounds like they're a very good fit for this. I would like to move the recommendations on page 32 with the addition of moving this to board this afternoon.
I see a seconder for that. Any questions on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That passes. Thank you for your time. Moving on, we've got Nancy Hughes, Emergency Management Coordinator, on the subject of Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Grant Application Evacuation Route Planning. Welcome, Nancy.
Good morning, thank you. Yes, we would like to apply for a community grant for evacuation planning. It would be a regional grant that would provide an evacuation route for the whole Sunshine Coast. It would detail the speed of progression, our choke points, and provide, actual routes that can be taken when Highway 101 is obstructed.
Thank you very much. I have Director McMahon.
Yes, this has been another topic of great community interest. I get asked about it pretty regularly. The last time around, I think we did 3 evacuation routes, and 1 was put forward from each local government. So 1 in Gibson's, 1 in Sechelt, 1 in the SCRD, if I remember correctly. So I just have to point out, Gibson's is teeny tiny, and the SCRD is really big. So if we were to proceed in that manner going forward, we would have Gibson's covered and recovered before we even started to chip away at the SCRD. So how are we going to prioritize the most important routes for evacuation planning?
Thank you for the question. My thought is that this is for the whole coast. It's all of Highway 101. And by having it as a regional grant, there's capacity there to hire like an engineering firm that will be able to provide a overall evacuation route with detail. So in my mind, the priority is the whole coast.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Director Inkster.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've been talking about this for 8 months to update this plan and do more of a plan. Is it okay if I move all 4 motions?
I don't see why not.
Yep.
We have a
Okay.
seconder.
I'm doing that.
I have a question. I have a list here. Director Stanford, you have questions?
Yes, thank you. I'm hearing 2 different things here. This is going to be a plan for the whole coast, and it's Highway 101. And the biggest issue that's coming forward on the island communities is there has been no indication of how to evacuate the islands. So I'm wondering how island communities can be part of this, and if there is no interest or ability to keep them within this this evacuation plan, what kind of funding, what kind of support can they get in order to provide even a basic starting point to demonstrate how we are looking at getting them off islands if that's necessary?
Thank you for your question. Obviously, it will be a marine evacuation from the islands. Part of the RFP for the regional grant can include that. As well, to fill a gap, the province has programs for personal preparedness and neighborhood preparedness. We had received funding for a 3-year contract to hire somebody for community evacuations. And to me, that's what fills the gap between the local authority evacuation plan and going out to communities and talking to them and providing a community-focused plan of where they should go. To me, it excuse me, it fills the gap, and that is part of the bigger plan for that. Actually, sorry, what I wanted to add is this actual grant does actually make it ineligible for us to provide workshops to community. So again, it's part and parcel to the bigger plan of evacuation plan for the Sunshine Coast and the islands.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking, Director Inkster, do you still have a question, or is that a residual hand?
No, I guess I was just excited about this application. I'll withdraw it.
Okay, I'm very interested in these programs for personal and neighborhood preparedness, and when it comes to the island, I think Dunkirk comes to mind. I see no other questions, so I'm gonna. Oh, there's Director Lee.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations on page 35. Is it? I skipped. Oh, well, that's easy.
Your checkered shirt brother did it.
So, thank you, Director Inkster. So seeing no other questions, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. We're going to, I have a request for a 5-minute break. We're going to return at 10:35. Welcome back to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Thursday, February 22nd. We are sorry for being 3 minutes late, but we're going to go on to Infrastructure Services Department fourth quarter review. If GM Rosenboom would introduce this.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. For you today is the quarterly report for 2023, the fourth quarter, on the activities of the Infrastructure Services Department. I want to highlight a few items. On page 38, there's a six-word sentence that full commissioning was completed for the Church Road project in last December, which is great news. So the project is now fully online, fully commissioned, done, operation. Other good news is that the first phase of the installation of the water meters in the Shield area is completed. Those were the retrofits of existing meters and installation of meters and in places where there was already a box to put a meter in, but the meter was never set in. So those 650 are in place, and the next phase will start in upcoming months to actually put the other 4,000 in. At page 41 and 42 and 43, there is a lot more information on development applications and how many are in the queue, how many we've received. We stepped away from the table that we used to present and with a lot more details, but we thought that this was a more appropriate way of indicating where we are at in terms of development applications. On the solid waste side, the report on page 51 and 52 indicate the results of last year's backyard composter rebate program, as well as the waste reduction initiative program, and who received funding for that. And staff are able to answer any other questions you might have about the report. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. I'm going to go to my speakers list. We have Director McMahon.
Right, lots of great information. So, top of page 40 about Chester Well, there's a project paused due to new information. That's intriguing. I'm intrigued. Do we have any further information on the new information?
Yes, we have a lot of information on new information, and that's a fire flow analysis. We might want to seek the opportunity to, if we do some upgrades to that well, to make sure that if there's any way we can increase the fire flow by upgrading the well, that we actually take the opportunity to do so.
Thank you for the answer. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. I have a bunch of questions. Thank you for the report. It's very interesting. Always nice to see what's happening. I have a question about the compost rebate program. Has there been quite a drop in uptake since the green bins have come along? Like, is it still relevant to have that rebate program now?
Good question.
Thank you. The program has been in place, already was in place prior to the green bin program. And I think at the time when the program, the residential curbside collection program for organics was introduced, this was considered to be a very valuable program. And I think that it's still being used. There are still being people applying for it. So the relevancy of it, it's hard for me to comment on that. I think it's still relevant because people are applying for it. The fact that it's not super oversubscribed or anything doesn't mean that there is a lot of use for it, but it's in general, it's known that it is there. So, yeah.
All right, well, that's something available to our constituents. Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. On the top of page 38, there's an outline of water main burying on Eastbourne. And I just want to clarify, it says project tendering for construction to be initiated Q1 2024. So that's just the tendering. When will the actual burial of the pipes be initiated? Is there any timeline on that?
Thank you for the question. That will, of course, depends on if we get a contractor that's willing to do the work and the availability of that contractor. So it will be dependent on the tendering process, but we're hoping to get that done within the upcoming months in the dry season.
I'm going to follow up a question for Director Stanford. So has this been put out to tender yet, or is it something that's going to happen in the future?
It's going to happen prior to the end of this. Oh, it's going to happen in Q1 for sure. I'm not sure if it's already just out or about to go out. It's about there.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yes. In response to Director Gabius, really keen gardeners do not want to give away their organics. They want to keep it because it's gold for the garden. So I think we should encourage that. I think it's great. On page 50, I was really interested to see about the 3 pilot biocover cells on our landfill. That's really great. I look forward to seeing the results of this project, because I have been wondering if there is an opportunity, if we build the landfill up, to do biocover as we're going, to try and mitigate our emissions. Just, I don't know if staff have any comments on that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Based on the results, the findings that will be presented to the board later this year or the next year, as part of that, those results, staff will also do an analysis of the applicability of the biocover option for our landfill and for intermediate closure, final closure, et cetera, et cetera. So will be considered. Thank you. More to come.
Okay. I'd like to think we're working smarter, not harder, right? Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. Page 44, no leak letters were circulated due to a vacancy. That is slightly alarming to me. I think leak resolution is a huge, given our situation. So I'm wondering if there's any update on this vacancy, or if anyone's been able to take that work on so that leaks get resolved.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question. We still have a vacancy currently within the strategic initiatives group. We have two absentees, positions that are not fully filled. And we were able to successfully retain somebody on a temporary basis as of this week to pick up some of this work again. But it's really on temporary. So we're posting shortly for a permanent filling of the position. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. On page 57, we've got a chart here showing the green waste tonnage, and it's showing quite a drop off for 2023 compared to the last 2 years. And I know that the last, I guess 2021, 2022, part of 2020 were pretty big spikes because people were spending more time at home, new members of our community. Is 2023 more representative of the historical normals, or is it still up from the historical normals? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Currently, I don't have that information at hand to compare it to prior to 2021 years. Thank you.
Yeah, it would be nice to see 2017, 18, 19. I'm going to go to Director McMahon.
Sure. On page 52, I was absolutely boggled that we received 2,694 appliances. Are these major appliances? Like, we're not counting like toaster ovens or kettles or something. People are throwing out 2,700 appliances a year? Just checking in.
Yes.
Thank you for the succinct answer. I'm going to go to Director Stanford.
Well, if you look behind me, Director McMahon, there is a stove sitting out on our deck. The appliances aren't designed to live as long as they used to, I think. I have a question on page 41. I'm finding this Langdale wastewater plant. I'm seeing the same line item that discussions are underway with YMCA camp. I'm just wondering if there's anything politically I can do to advance discussions. Are they active discussions? Would really like to see this project at least inching forward because it's very important to that community to have a good septic system.
Thank you for the question. This project changed hands in terms of project management to ensure that it's actually moving forward in a more expedited manner. Progress is being made now where it was less in the past due to other staff had other priorities. As you know, our capital projects team is quite stretched at the moment. And so this is one of the projects that was reassigned to make sure that this gets a higher priority than it used to have. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. I'm going to go to Director Lumley, as he hasn't spoken on this yet.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question. I was just curious. If you look at the solid, like if you look at the curbside garbage, and this question is slightly routed on driving through the regional district and seeing massive garbage cans at the end of people's properties. Just exactly when did the organics program, like in the regional district, fire up? Like, at what point was it? Is it kind of maybe a two-part question? I'll just get my questions out of the way, because it just seems there's no movement in the curbside garbage pickup in the regional district. And my other question would be, and I know this for a fact because they audit commercial garbage now for like organics and so on and so forth, because we've had contaminated garbage and I've paid a fine to the regional for the solid waste. I just wondered, and this question could be for the directors as well. Has there been any discussion about auditing or beginning to audit any of the garbage that makes its way from households?
Yeah, GM, I believe we have had some studies of our trash and what kind of garbage is going into our landfill. Have we not?
Thank you for the question. There's two parts to this. The program started in October 1st, 2020. So that's so prior to the graphs. So that's why the dip is not included, is not visible in the graphs. And it was a substantial dip. There's still residential, there's still organics being landfilled. Primarily commercial and institutional. There is still residential, but it's a limited amount. And last year, May, a report was presented to the board with the results of the waste composition study that I think it was in May, but at least somewhere in 2023 with more details about that. And yes, audits are being undertaken also by the contractor who's actually the same as the contractor in Gibson's.
Director Stanford, does that answer your question? Okay, good.
Oh, no,
Sorry,
wasn't me.
alternate Director Lumley. I'm going to go to Director Lee as he hasn't spoken on this yet.
I don't believe an update would be complete unless I asked the question about the generator at the Garden Bay pump station. Is there a chance we will be getting one this year?
Yes.
Thank you for your succinct answer.
Everybody remember that so I don't have to ask the question again.
It was, yes, absolutely. That's fantastic. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, I love this discussion. I have so many questions. First of all, I'm happy to see that Square Bay wastewater plant, the request for quote is being developed, so that's good news. Happy to see that. If I read the charts correctly about the tonnage garbage pickup, looks like curbside garbage pickup is up. So there's more garbage going to the landfill. Recycling is down, green waste is down. So looks like we've got some work to do there. I have a question. Where are we with the mock billing for North and South Pender? Is this part of the infrastructure work plan, or is this another department's work plan? Just want to know if that we're still on track. Oh, I see CFO Perot.
CFO Perot, you have an answer for this question?
Yes, it's a joint venture. I think mostly with the support of the new positions that are planned to be approved later today. That's part of the resourcing required to implement some of this. The other components are the continuation of the rate reviews. We also are looking to the continued installation of the meter billing, but for North and South, we're starting to develop the project plan, and so on track, we do target sometime in 2020, probably 2026, but 2025 we'll look for some progress. So more to come on the timelines and implementation plan.
Thank you for your answer. I'm going to go to Director Stanford.
Last question. Thank you. I've had a couple of, am I getting an echo? Okay. Questions about responsibility for managing invasives on properties that are owned by and managed by the SCRD. This is specifically to the work that's been done recently around Church Road, and all the infrastructure has disturbed the land, and now broom is growing in the area. And so local neighbors are wondering if there's any responsibility for managing things like broom on SCRD property.
Thank you for the question. If there would be, I would have to look into this. If there would be broom growing on MOTI right away, or is it actually SRD property? Because there's a lot of work that was completed on MOTI property, That's why I was asking.
Yeah, my understanding is actually on SCRD property, but we can dive deeper into that.
Okay, I will follow up. Thank you.
Director Lee, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Probably I wasn't paying quite enough attention, but it was for the water meter installations, Phase 3. Jan Rosenboom said we were finished one phase, which I believe is the retrofits, and 650 meters. But I think we have around 5,000 meters total. Are we on target to finish the installation in 2025? And are we monitoring the ones we put in for leaks? 2 questions.
Thank you for the question. Yes, and yes. So the first yes is related to, are we monitoring? Yes, once all the information is confirmed and uploaded in our system, we'll include those. Second yes is to, yes, it will be completed in 2024, all the 4,000 installations. So the plan is currently being finalized, but the plan is to work with 10 crews on the installation of the meters, and that's how the 4,000 can be installed starting late April, late March, early April, and then until the end of the year, until we're done. Thank you.
If I can ask you to expand on this question, have we found any leaks within the Seashell metered system yet?
I can't answer that question because I don't think that all the data, phase one has just been concluded, so those data are currently being uploaded in the system, and then we have to do the meter read. So I don't think that I can answer that question yet.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
However, we, as one of the directors, is very familiar with when there's a leak identified. We currently there's a situation where a leak was identified by a neighbor. We looked at it. We install a meter to confirm, and we follow up. So there is active involvement on leaks in the Seashell area.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, test well drilling in the Seashell area. When we originally got a report about this last summer, the timeline was that we were hoping for the test well drilling to be complete by now. And I realized that the deadline slipped, and it's now later in 2024. Why didn't, it would have been nice if we had test well results before the budget. We didn't, but how come the timeline on that slipped?
Thank you for the question. The timeline slipped because of competing priorities within the capital projects team, and currently the current status is that we're waiting for approval from the Seashell Nation to advance with the drilling within their SWIA. It's currently under rights and title review with them. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Director Gabias, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Belated follow-up to my previous question about mock billing. I was under the impression that this was going to start quite a bit earlier than 2026. And was my impression wrong, or the timeline has simply changed? And if so, what are the reasons for the change?
CFO Perot.
Yeah, I think we will have to bring a project plan because I think there needs to be clarity on when we'll actually be billing individuals. And so there's terminology that's been used as far as mock billing and when we'll actually be billing properties. So we're just working out on when those triggers will be in our ability to do that with both the technology in alignment with things like amendments to bylaws and such. So again, we haven't really, we've begun to contemplate, but we don't have a complete plan drafted as far as milestones, et cetera. So more to come on that, and we'll be able to refine. So things to contemplate are currently we're charging on an annual basis. So how we shift to those particular with new rates will have to be considered as part of the implementation. So those are some things. So difference between mock billing, meaning giving people some heads up and examples of what it will look like, and transitioning to formally billing 100% volumetrically are what's being contemplated right now.
Well, thank you, staff, for this report, and I don't see any other questions. So I am going to move along to our next report. Now I understand that GM Hall is not in the building, and CAO McKinley is not. So we have a grab bag of staff that's going to answer questions for our board, and we have a. Do we need an introduction on this, or shall we just jump into questions? let's say, I'm gonna let Mr. Jackson say a few words.
Thank you. Just in GM and Hall's absence, I'm here with Nancy Hughes, our Emergency Operations Coordinator, to answer any questions the board has. We have the Q4 report, year-end report for 2023 before you. It does represent an overall busy year for all of our departments, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
And we've got a very short list at the moment. Director McMahon.
Yeah, another very interesting report. On page 60, there is mention of a collaboration with the Coastal Douglas Fir Conservation Partnership and UBC. This sounds really interesting, and I don't know, it hadn't impinged on my consciousness before now. Is there any more information available on this?
Thank you for the question. I think the synopsis in the report is most of the public-facing information that we have this time, but we did have a unique opportunity before us to work with these partners on this project to bring something to our community that was not otherwise budgeted for. It's a great timing for the work as well, I was at, because it will really link into OCP renewal, create the potential for new development permit areas for consideration of protection of sensitive ecosystems related to the coastal Douglas fir. And I would further add it relative to a report that was before the Electoral Area Services Committee on our OCP Amendment Board policy. This is exactly the type of information that can be used in a situation like that to help inform applications as we see them and look for opportunities for protection of such ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. This morning's presentation about the fire flow kind of triggered something. Where are we at with the regional growth strategy? Are we still looking to do that? Are we going to incorporate it in the OCP renewal? Like what's the latest on that?
Yes, thank you for the question. So essentially, after the regional growth baseline work was completed, there was a motion that was for the local governments, being the regional district, District of Seashelt and Town of Gibsons, and potentially the Seashelt Nation, who is also possibly looking at doing some official community planning level work, to incorporate that baseline work into their OCP developments, which would inform, in a way, sort of lay the ground to do some higher level sort of regional planning collaborative work without actually going down the road of a regional growth strategy at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Director Stanford.
Yes, further to the CDFPC cooperation, it is really good to see that the Sunshine Coast is involved with that. The Gambier Islands Trust, local trust area is also a signatory to that program for coastal Douglas fir. And just hoping that some of the data just happens to include the islands as well. I know that's not always how it goes, but sometimes I see the data does include the islands. So it'd be nice to see that. Thank you.
Not so much a question, but I'm going to go on to Director McMahon.
Yep. More of a comment. The fire department reports keep getting better and better, and complete with anecdotes and photos, which is really great. Much appreciated. I am still contemplating the photo at the bottom of page 70, how anybody managed to flip their car coming off the ferry. Boggles my mind. But anyway, I just wanted to thank our fire departments for their excellent reporting.
I studied the photo and I figured it out. Yeah, I'll talk to you offline. I'm going to go to Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair, and good segue. I wanted to talk about the volunteer firefighters and express my gratitude to all of them. I've been learning lots about volunteer firefighters in the last month. I've had some really good conversations with some of the members in Half Moon Bay. And yeah, I think the challenges are increasing for our membership. We have a lot of changing demographics. We have, hard economic times, and I think we're going to have to be looking at how we move forward and how we adjust to the new realities. But I have a question about mental health support for firefighters and what is available to them, because understanding that there's a lot of, medical calls with an aging population and, a lot of highway accidents that need to be attended to. So any information about what's available to volunteer firefighters, whether it's through you or staff, would be great.
Ms. Hughes, I understand that there is an employment assistance program available to all the members of the SCRD, including the fire department, that has mental health counseling available free of charge as part of our workspace.
Yes, thank you for that. That is correct. It also extends to our ESS team and to our other volunteers.
And personally, I'd like to say that after a very gruesome incident that I was part of, I took advantage of this program, and I talked to a counselor for a year, and it absolutely helped. And I urge anyone who is experiencing any mental health crisis or difficulties to do the same. We have Senior Manager Parker. Are you in the room? He's in the attendees list. Oh, okay. Can you... would you like to speak, Senior Manager Parker?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. Yes, in addition to what's been mentioned through Homewood Health, they also offer crisis response. They have critical incident stress debriefing that can be actioned upon request after an incident has occurred. And I also know there has been a local group of people that have been involved in some debriefing as well. So that's all through Homewood Health, which is our Employee and Family Assistance Program. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to thank staff for that report and move on to our next report, which is Community Services, Appendix H, page 93. GM Gagnon, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a formal introduction. I just am happy to answer any questions that might be out there about the quarterly report from Community Services. Thank you.
And we have a question, Director McMahon.
Yes, indeed. On page 97, there is reference to the sports field strategy. I'd just be interested in a little further information. That started a few years ago. It kind of stalled, but it's very important. Who's involved and how's it going?
Thank you for the question. So I know that several years ago, and there have been ongoing conversation with sport user groups, but I don't believe a strategy was ever initiated. This particular strategy that's being referred to in the quarterly report is funding that was received in 2023. We weren't able to kick that study off due to staffing capacity, but we are very happy to announce that we actually had a kickoff meeting earlier this week. The participants of this study include the Town of Gibsons, the District of Sechelt, the Shoshone Nation, the school district, and ourselves will be participating in this joint use strategy. There is a significant community engagement portion of the strategy that we foresee as part of the review. The kickoff meeting just happened with the participants earlier this week, so I know that they're talking about the development of an RFP and the process and project charter, so it's just in its infancy. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. I've got Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. On page 139, it's really nice to see the work that's being done on the ports, and especially seeing that there is movement with an engineer that's being secured for Hopkins Landing. I can't emphasize enough how important any news possible on advancing the fix for Hopkins Landing is to that community. I do get quite a few questions and concerns that we're just going to abandon it. So anything to convince people that that's not going to happen would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stanford. Director Inkster.
Thanks, Chair. I think in future I'll be talking more about rec facilities, but this day, just in reference to the sports field question that was made by Director McMahon, and I'm glad to see continuous discussion on that issue. What I think the board may have to turn their mind to going forward is two things, and that just to sort of let you know what's coming down the pipe is turf field. We have to start talking about that as a region. And we also might have to talk through staff about dedicated fields. So we might have to start looking at those two issues in order to meet the demands of the user groups. And Shirley Macy, if anybody's thinking what's dedicated field, Shirley Macy is a good example of dedicated field. The only problem is it floods. So that's the challenge, because the regional district did a good plan a number of years ago of putting a number of fields in there and putting a good service clubhouse, basically washrooms and/or facilities in there, meeting facilities, but there's the challenge with flooding. But it's a good dedicated field example, so you don't have user group clashes that are causing some problems behind the scenes with how the regional district and the municipalities try to deliver sports services to adults and youth. So I just wanted to flag those two things that we need to start getting our head around. Thanks.
Thank you for your insight. I'm going to go to Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. On page, whatever it is, just a sec. Page 97, we talk about park sign standards, regional sign strategy, and priority repairs. I'm quite interested in wayfinding signs on the highway. I was wondering if that's included, that concept is included in this category of project?
Thank you for the question through the chair. So in terms of wayfinding signage, if you're referring to the signage that we have at park entrances like a Cliff Gilker that is along the highway but on SCRD property, that is included. If we're talking about highway signage, that isn't necessarily within our jurisdiction. So perhaps if I could just get a bit of clarity, Director Lee, on when you refer to highway directional signage, what would you be referring to?
In my area, for instance, we have parks like Baker Beach that unless you're a local, you're unlikely to find them by following signs. There's no sign on the main road. There's no signs on the 3 secondary turns. You got to do that. I'm actually kind of confirming that we're not actually dealing with that, but it's a question, are we going to deal with that aspect of it?
Thank you for the clarity. I appreciate that. So no, I would suggest that that is not in this scope of work that we're talking about when we're talking about signages. We're talking about signs on SCRD property, everything from the entrance to a park to wayfinding within a park. But highway signage is not in the scope. It's interesting that you bring that up, though. I would like to just anecdotally, my previous experience before I came here, that was a big topic of discussion. And in actuality, highway signage are decreasing because people are relying more and more on smart devices to get them there. So we were in that discussion about actually pulling down signs because they just they were ineffective, and they're just so costly. So it's just an interesting concept of what's happening over time as people rely on smart devices and less on physical signage, but not a part of this scope. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. You're now enabling me to defend myself a little better. Thank you.
Good. All right. Thank you, Director Lee. Director McMahon.
Yes, during budget, we had a conversation about the Seashell Arena well, which the project's on page 109. And after the meeting, Director Inkster, who has been around longer than any of us, pointed out that the well had originally been owned by the SCRD, not the District of Seashell. So that initiated the question of, do we have records for that well? And I'm just asking staff if anybody had managed to find out, do we have records?
Thank you for the question. From my understanding, both within the SCRD and through significant conversation with the DOS, whatever records there are to be found, we have, and there are not many. Thank you.
I'd love to see these records. That would be great. Okay, we have a question from Director Inkster, or maybe a statement.
Yeah, no, sort of. Thanks again, Director McMahon, for bringing that up. We're working together today across the table here. I think that's true. Where are those records, and it's difficult because I've been looking, and I have to say that the resource that the regional district has is staff. So a couple have retired, but they still have at least one staff member who probably has some information that's still with the regional district that I'm not sure. I don't want to put them on the spot, but they're quite involved in facilities right now, and I think they may know if the information is not written down. Yeah.
Follow-up question.
Sure, in general, I have been pleasantly surprised by the records we've managed to find, going back in some cases to the late 70s. So, yeah, if we find it, great. And I don't know if the province was supposed to be keeping track of any of this either because of well licenses, but that's not our problem. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, GM, for your answers. And it looks like we've come to the end of our speakers list for this particular section. So I'm going to move on to our Corporate and Administrative Services Semi-Annual Report for July to December. I see Corporate Officer Sherry Reid in the room to answer questions, and Jerry Parker and Tina Perot are also available. Is there anyone in staff that would like to speak to this? Go ahead. Otherwise, I'll begin to take questions. All right. Well, I don't see any questions. I personally have gone over this, and there's a number of things that I'm going to share with my community. I see there's a number of completed projects within this report that I think are good news that I think that we can collectively go out there and say, look at the SCRD's doing some really good work. And I do see a list of questions here. I'm going to go to Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I was just interested in an update on our records and information management. I call it data gathering. The old minutes, the old reports, all that stuff. Are we making good progress, and are we going to be complete this year? And are we going to have a nice new search engine over it? So just a couple of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. So on page 143, I think we talk about electronic conversion and scanning of our vital records. So our historical board minutes have been scanned into the system. What we're really focused on right now is our migration into SharePoint. So from our current system, moving those files into SharePoint. And I think that our department is actually scheduled to go
to the next migration, which won't be happening until November. But once that happens and we're into the SharePoint environment, I think that at that time, we will be looking at ways of connecting some of our routinely releasable records through our website. So we're currently exploring options for how we're going to surface that data and maybe look for something closer to the end of this year.
Thank you for the answer. We're going to go to Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. On page 160, I know there's a emerging issue is reposting the IT security position. It's concerning that we still don't have this position filled, and is there alternative solutions being considered?
Mr. Parker, do you have an answer for that question?
Thank you. Yes, I can start by saying we have been working with the manager of information systems to revise and evaluate the position. It is completed as of this week, and the job posting is set to go. I know there have been some strategies on interim arrangements that have been discussed internally, and that's the current state of where things are at.
Thank you.
It's a real shame we don't offer workforce housing. I'm going to go to Director McMahon.
Thank you. I'm just following up on the website because for various reasons, it has been sort of frustrating trying to find things on the website. Not everybody wants to read all of our minutes going back for many years, although of course we do, but there are key reports and plans that get referenced quite a bit. One of them that came up recently was the draft cemetery master plan, but do we have a priority to get these key plans like the recreation plan and the comprehensive water plan and all those key documents that we have for planning up on the website where they can easily be found?
Sorry. Oh, look at that. It's Manager Buckley. Can you answer this question for Director McMahon?
I can absolutely assist with an answer. Yeah, thank you for your question, Director McMahon. And I'm not too sure if our corporate officer may want to chime in as well, because I think there's a couple of things at play here. Understanding that, yeah, the document library, I think just the vast amount of data that's made its way into it has made searching within the document library a little bit more difficult than we had anticipated. But what I would say is if there are plans that the community are asking for, or if there are documents that you would like to see make their way onto the website and you feel they're not accessible, just to please let me know, because there are absolutely ways that we can make them, as I say, far more accessible, whether or not that's integrating them into existing pages, or perhaps even looking at a different page which maybe just houses all of these plans.
Very good. Well, I do not see any other hands up, so I am going to move on to communications. We have none. New business. There is no new business. We have no in-camera session today, and so I am going to call for, sorry, go ahead. A motion to adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn. I have a seconder. All in favor? Very good. At this point, I'm going to ask if anyone in the gallery has any questions. There, Connie, I will allow you. All right, you have permission to speak. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson Bax. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, thank you very much. I wanted to look at page 37 of the agenda. And with regard to on-time performance, for BC Transit buses, and we see an average in the 60% range, which Is everybody caught up with me?
So I think it's 137 you're talking about, perhaps?
137, yes.
Okay,
yes,
you said, I thought I
one-
heard 37.
Oh, no, 137.
Okay, very good.
So 60% 2023 average for on-time performance for BC Transit buses on the coast. Do we know what's causing that low level of on-time performance, and how is that being addressed?
Director McMahon, you have an answer to this?
In fact, I asked that at a previous meeting, and part of the trouble is BC Ferries. And I actually cannot remember what the full answer to the question was, but it was, I think, for the Q3 report, I asked that very same question.
And our GM she just left the room, so we don't have staff here to answer that question for you. If you wait, I believe someone's running to get a staff member. Oh, look, there we go. GM Gagnon, do you have a question, or would you like Ms. Jorgensen to repeat the question?
Thank you, Chair. No, I was listening in, so I heard the question. The question was about why is our on-time performance only at 60%? And I think yesterday was a great example of why our on-time performance suffers. We had filming at Davis Bay, which had significant traffic delays. We had a light out at the four-way intersection at Seashelt. We had a garbage truck on the road, and all of that leads to delays. So our buses are behind schedule. If there's an accident on the road, we have a delay. So it's just a challenge of having one major thoroughfare with sort of no ways around it, no ands, if, or buts. And the other significant impact on on-time performance, of course, are storms. So whether that's a snowstorm or freezing. So all those implicate our on-time performance. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. And personally, I've been taking the bus a few times this month, and I plug in the number of the bus stop in it, and it gives me a performance. It tells me when the next bus is going to arrive, and so that information is absolutely fantastically useful. And the bus is never early, which is also very good. Do you have any other questions, Connie?
No, thank you very much for that to both yourself and to staff.
All right, thank you. And with that, I am going to I'm going to say thank you, and we're going to log off, and I'll see everybody this afternoon.